I'm Haley, I'm 25, and 2 weeks ago I nearly lost my life alone in my apartment while my entire family was busy celebrating my twin sister's birthday at a party I wasn't even invited to. When the paramedic asked for my emergency contact, I actually laughed because there was no one to list, but then he paused and told me my sister had called it in and had given them a very different story. That moment changed everything because what Harper told them wasn't just inaccurate, it was carefully framed to make sure my voice wouldn't matter if I woke up. Before I take you deeper into this, please like and subscribe if this story connects with you and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now let me rewind 4 weeks to the day everything started to unravel. It was a Tuesday at 2:47 in the afternoon, and I was organizing books in the children's section of Millbrook Public Library when my phone lit up with an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but on the other end was a calm hospital voice telling me my grandmother, Eleanor Whitmore, had been rushed in after a stroke. I don't remember leaving work or driving there, only running through bright hospital hallways until I reached her room. She looked fragile in that bed, surrounded by machines, her silver hair spread across the pillow like a quiet crown she'd earned after decades of kindness. I pulled up a chair and held her cold hand anyway, because she was the only person who had ever truly held mine. Every Sunday for 6 years, I drove 40 minutes just to sit with her, bake lemon cookies, and listen to stories about my grandfather while she checked in on my life in ways no one else ever did. My mother never came, always too busy, and Harper never showed up either, always too important, but I was there every single week. When the doctor told me she was stable but unresponsive and asked about contacting family, I said I would handle it. I sat alone with her for half an hour, whispering that she wasn't alone, never knowing that one day soon, I would be the one left that way. The sharp sound of heels announced my mother's arrival before I even saw her, polished and composed, followed by Harper glued to her phone and my father lingering quietly behind them. No one hugged me, no one asked how I was, and when my mother asked how long I'd been there, I answered simply and watched her walk past me to the bike. Asked if the doctor had said anything about my grandmother's condition, and the answer was the same uncertainty, a coma with no clear timeline. Before Harper finally looked up and made a comment about being surprised I even showed up, implying I was usually too unwell to manage things like this. She said it with a soft smile that made it sting even more, and when I said I was fine, she studied me and suggested I looked worn down and needed to take better care of myself. Before I could reply, my mother stepped in and told me to go get coffee so they could speak to the doctor alone, and I stood there hoping my dad might defend me, but he stayed silent as always. I stepped into the hallway instead of leaving completely and heard my mother ask, in a hushed but urgent tone, whether my grandmother had said anything about her will, and that single question made my stomach drop because money was clearly on her mind before anything else. That night, back in my small apartment filled with second-hand furniture and plants I talked to for comfort, I saw the family group chat suddenly come back to life with a meeting scheduled at my mother's house, no one bothering to ask if I could attend. Scrolling through old messages reminded me how absent I was from their lives, and that's when I pulled out the letter my grandmother had given me years ago, warning me that things might get complicated and telling me to trust her attorney, Mr. Bennett. The next morning at the meeting, my mother ran it like a formal hearing, placing Harper front and center and assigning her as medical proxy without discussion, dismissing my involvement and brushing off my objections as usual. When I asked about my own birthday, which fell on the same day as Harper's party, the note read, "Here's something sweet for you. Enjoy your day tomorrow, Harper." And even though my first instinct was to throw the box away, I opened it and found 6 beautifully decorated cupcakes topped with vanilla frosting and tiny edible flowers that looked professionally made. The label said Sweet Beginnings Bakery, the one place I trusted because it was supposed to be nut-free. And I stood there torn between suspicion and hope because Harper had never apologized before, yet a small part of me still wanted to believe she was trying. I told myself I'd decide in the morning, but loneliness won, and on my birthday I woke up to complete silence, no calls, no messages, nothing at all, while social media was full of posts celebrating Harper with a huge party, glowing captions, and the words, "surrounded by everyone I love," where I was clearly not included. Sitting alone on my kitchen floor, I lit a candle on one cupcake and whispered a quiet birthday wish to myself, then took a bite and immediately noticed something was wrong, a faint nut-like taste that made my throat itch and my lips tingle. Panic set in as I realized the cupcakes were made with almond flour, and within minutes my breathing became tight and difficult as I searched desperately for my emergency medication, only to find the case empty because I'd forgotten to refill it. Shaking and struggling to stay upright, I called for emergency help, barely able to speak, and when the operator asked if there was anyone they should contact, I weakly said no, until she paused and told me someone named Harper Parsons had already called about me 2 minutes earlier, a moment that made the room spin and left me realizing this was no accident at all. Told it was easier to focus on one celebration as if I didn't matter. I left feeling exhausted in a way that went deeper than tiredness, and a few days later, when a neatly wrapped pink box showed up at my door with a cheerful birthday message from Harper, I had no idea it was the start of something far more troubling than family favoritism. Ed sighed as if I wasn't even in the room. She told them I had a habit of exaggerating my allergies for attention and warned them not to take it seriously, and my mind couldn't even grasp what that meant at first because Harper had called emergency services before I did to paint me as a liar. As I lay there barely able to breathe, one thought kept repeating in my fading awareness. How did she know this would happen tonight? How did she know I'd react at all unless it was planned? I remember collapsing onto the kitchen floor, the half-eaten cupcake beside me looking harmless, and the distant sound of sirens growing louder as everything went dark, knowing help was coming but also realizing my own sister had tried to slow it down. I came to inside the ambulance under harsh lights with an oxygen mask on my face and a sharp sting in my leg where medication had been administered, and a calm paramedic named Daniel told me I was stable now and that I'd scared them badly. Then he asked, gently but directly, if I knew my sister had called ahead to say I was pretending, and when I insisted that wasn't true, he showed me my readings and said quietly that numbers don't lie. He admitted he'd seen families do terrible things to protect their image and shared that someone close to him hadn't survived a similar situation, then asked the question that changed everything. Did Harper know about my allergy? I didn't hesitate because she'd known since we were kids, and the look on his face told me he understood exactly what that meant. Hours later, alone in a silent hospital room with no family in sight, my phone rang from an unknown number and this time I answered. The man introduced himself as Richard Bennett, my grandmother's attorney, the same name from the letter she'd given me years ago, and he said softly that the time had come, that he'd heard about my hospitalization and had documents my grandmother prepared in case something happened to her or to me. As I agreed to see him, my hands shaking around the letter I'd carried all this time, I finally understood that none of this was random, and that the truth my grandmother protected was about to surface. That I kept thinking about my grandmother's words. Trust Mr. Bennett, he knows the truth. And that night I barely slept, staring at the ceiling and wondering how my own sister could do something like this and what she might try next. If you've ever felt ignored or pushed aside by your own family, I want you to know you're not alone because I understand that pain deeply. The next morning at exactly 9 a.m., Harper walked into my hospital room holding white flowers and crying, followed by my parents and relatives, all putting on a show of concern that felt rehearsed and hollow. They praised Harper for acting quickly, even though none of them had called or checked on me before, and my mother casually downplayed how serious my condition was until the nurse corrected her. Harper claimed she had tried to include me in her birthday plans and said I was too unwell to attend, even though no invitation ever came. I stayed calm, thanked them, and watched closely as Harper's confident smile briefly faltered. After they left, I contacted Daniel, the paramedic, and showed him the photo I had taken of the cupcakes. He immediately noticed something was wrong and later confirmed the bakery listed on the label never uses ingredients that could cause my reaction. When the original box was examined, another label was found underneath showing the treats were made with ingredients my sister knew could harm me, and it became clear someone had intentionally tried to mislead me. Determined to uncover the truth, I worked with a digital expert who helped me access old shared family data that had been forgotten but never removed, and days later he called me in to show hundreds of messages exchanged between my sister and my mother. Messages that finally revealed everything I had feared was true. About a week before my birthday, I uncovered messages that stopped me cold. In them, my sister and mother calmly discussed ordering cupcakes made with ingredients they knew I couldn't tolerate, even joking about how I never refill my emergency medication on time. They talked about calling emergency services before I could and describing me as overly dramatic so help wouldn't come quickly, all while mentioning my grandmother's legal papers as if this were a business plan instead of a family matter. As I kept reading, it became clear this wasn't a misunderstanding. Timestamps and records confirmed everything was real. They even discussed creating a false narrative about my stability so no one would question them later. And worse, they admitted to watching my movements through a hallway camera installed without my knowledge. One message sealed it. Whether I recovered or not, my sister would look like the caring one, and they believed they would win either way. Later, when I met my grandmother's attorney, I learned she had overheard a disturbing conversation years earlier and quietly changed her legal documents to protect me. She left her home and savings to me, along with a letter reminding me that I was loved and seen. The attorney offered a quiet path forward, but I knew silence would only let lies grow. I chose instead to speak up because what they did wasn't just wrong. It needed to be answered for openly and truthfully, not hidden behind excuses or rewritten stories. He looked at me for a long second, then gave a slow, thoughtful nod and asked what I was planning. I explained that it wouldn't be a typical meeting but one held in my grandmother's hospital room, because that morning her neurologist had shared encouraging news. Her brain activity had increased, she was reacting to voices and she could squeeze hands on command, meaning she might be aware even if she couldn't speak. Doctors believed familiar voices and emotional moments could help her continue improving, and I wanted her to hear the truth with everyone present, whether she could respond or not. I told him this wasn't just about legal matters but about letting her know who truly stood by her, and making sure the truth was spoken out loud in front of the whole family. He agreed it would need to be handled carefully but said he could arrange it. That evening, I called my sister and told her there would be a family meeting at the hospital about Grandma's estate, and though she tried to sound calm, the hesitation in her voice gave her away. The next day, the hospital room was crowded with relatives. My parents stood together dressed as if for a formal event, and my grandmother lay quietly as monitors beeped faster than before, almost like she sensed what was happening. When I spoke to her, her fingers moved slightly in my hand and I knew she was trying. My grandmother's attorney stood at the foot of the bed and explained that he had called the meeting because there was a legal update that changed everything. When he revealed a newer will prepared 2 years earlier, the room went silent. He read aloud that all previous documents were cancelled and that my grandmother had left her home and savings to me. My sister protested, calling it impossible, but the attorney calmly confirmed the document was properly signed, verified, and legally valid. As everyone stared in shock, I saw my father turn to my mother and quietly ask if she had known, and in that moment, I realized I was invisible no longer. My father finally turned to my mother and confronted her, saying she had told him Eleanor changed the will to include Harper equally, and now it was clear that wasn't true. His voice broke as years of deception surfaced, and he demanded to know what else had been hidden from him. My mother tried to deflect, claiming Eleanor was confused and not fully aware, but Mr. Bennet calmly explained that my grandmother had completed a full cognitive evaluation just 1 month before signing the document and was found to be completely sound. The room shifted as relatives began questioning why everything was left to me, and that's when Mr. Bennet revealed a second document, a letter my grandmother had written explaining her choice. My mother tried to stop it, but Mr. Bennet made it clear the decision was mine, and for the first time I felt steady enough to speak. I told him to read it. As the letter was read aloud, it revealed that my grandmother overheard my mother and sister discussing cutting me out and decided she needed to protect me because I was the only one who showed up out of genuine care. The room filled with gasps, denial, and shock, while my grandmother's words described years of resentment, favoritism, and silence she deeply regretted. When the letter ended, I stepped forward and explained that my grandmother wasn't wrong, and that I now understood exactly why she made her decision. I then revealed messages that showed plans involving food I couldn't safely eat and instructions meant to delay emergency help. Messages verified by a digital expert and supported by data records. The room erupted as relatives reacted in disbelief, while my sister insisted it was all fabricated, but the evidence confirmed otherwise. As the truth settled in, it became clear that the family could no longer deny what had been done, and nothing would ever be the same again. Detective Maria Santos from the Millbrook Police Department called me on a Tuesday morning, her voice steady but serious. She told me they had finished reviewing all the materials I provided, the text messages, medical records, metadata, and witness statements, and there was enough evidence to start a formal criminal investigation. The charges could include conspiracy to commit assault, reckless endangerment, and obstruction of emergency services. She explained that the digital forensics expert had confirmed the authenticity of the messages, and they already had warrants to access my mother's and sister's devices to gather more proof. I could feel the weight of it all, the reality finally sinking in that this was serious and could not be brushed aside. When I asked if they would be arrested, she said it depended on what came from the devices, but she assured me that there would be consequences for their actions. That evening, Dad called only to say Victoria had emptied the joint accounts and left town, taking Harper with her with no contact or explanation. In the days that followed, Grandma started physical therapy and managed to stand on her own, holding my hand and smiling with pride, telling me how strong I was. A week later, Detective Santos called again, confirming they had recovered deleted drafts and messages my mother had tried to hide, proof that the plan to harm me had been deliberate, not accidental. I felt a mix of relief and resolve, knowing the truth was finally coming to light. When I asked what would happen next, she said the next step was questioning my mother and sister, and once that began, everything they had done would be exposed. Watching Grandma resting peacefully, I realized that after a lifetime of being dismissed and underestimated, the lies had been broken, the evidence undeniable, and for the first time justice was within reach. Based on the evidence I submitted, including messages, digital reports, and medical documents, I was informed that formal charges were moving forward against Harper Parsons for reckless behavior that put my safety at risk, and that my mother, Victoria Parsons, was also being charged for helping plan it and attempting to delay emergency help. Hearing it labeled so clearly made everything real in a way I couldn't ignore anymore, because this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a deliberate act by people who were supposed to protect me. I was told both would appear in court the following week, and the prosecution was confident the case was strong, with possible prison time on the table for each of them. After the call, I sat quietly, letting the weight of it all settle in as the consequences began unfolding fast. Harper lost her job at a respected marketing firm within days, officially for violating company standards, though everyone knew the real reason was reputational risk. My mother's social circle quickly disappeared, her club ties and charity roles quietly erased, and invitations stopped without explanation. Even my father, who had always avoided conflict, finally acted, filing for divorce, moving out, and eventually calling to admit his failures, not asking forgiveness but acknowledging the harm he allowed. I didn't forgive him, but I listened, and that felt like a small step forward. When I later walked into my grandmother's house as its new owner, the emotion hit me all at once. Not sadness or anger, but a deep sense of safety and belonging I had never known. Every room held memories, from the familiar scent in the kitchen to the quiet bedroom where I found a box filled with every card and drawing I had ever given her, proof that I had always mattered to someone. That night, a close friend sat with me on the porch, asking nothing, simply sharing the moment, and for the first time in decades I felt rooted. A month later, a message came from Harper asking to talk and apologize, and after sitting with it for a long time, I replied honestly, saying I didn't carry hatred, but I also didn't carry trust, and I was choosing peace over reopening old wounds. This wasn't about punishment, it was about finally choosing myself. I set a boundary and I meant it. I blocked her number. My mom never reached out. Maybe pride held her back, or maybe her lawyers advised silence. Either way, that quiet became a gift. My dad called once a week. We talked about small, ordinary things. The weather, his new apartment, how Grandma was doing in rehab. Not deep conversations, just little steps toward something that might never fully heal. I should have stood up for you, he said one night. Every time they pushed you aside, I should have spoken up. I didn't respond with anger. Yes, you should have, I admitted. I was a coward. He paused. But at least I'm being honest now. Grandma continued improving. Her speech returned, and so did her familiar stubbornness. She would be in rehab for several more months, but the doctors were hopeful. You're stronger than they ever gave you credit for, she told me during my last visit. I always knew. I learned it from you. He squeezed my hand. I'm proud of you, Haley. Not for the house or the money, but for standing up and setting boundaries. I nodded. She smiled. That's the hardest part. Now I sit on Grandma's porch, my porch, watching the sunset. 3 months have passed since my birthday, 3 months since I almost died alone, 3 months since I truly understood what my family was capable of. Harper's trial is next month, Mom's the week after. I'll testify, but I'm not afraid. My next birthday is coming, 26 this year. I'll have a small celebration. Daniel, a few library friends, Aunt Patricia, Uncle Robert, and of course Grandma, who insists she won't miss it. No big party, no professional photographer, no massive cake. Just people who actually want to be there, and that makes all the difference. My phone buzzes. Daniel's name. Hey, want to grab dinner sometime? Friends or more, whatever you're comfortable with. I smile for the first time in a long while. It doesn't hurt. I type back, dinner sounds perfect, and set my phone aside to watch the last light fade over Maple Drive. Here's what I've learned. Family isn't just blood. It's who shows up when you're in danger, who fights for you when you can't fight for yourself. And sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's building a life so good that the people who hurt you become irrelevant. I'm not invisible anymore. I'm not the afterthought, the difficult one, the ghost. I'm Haley and I'm finally home. Remember this. Your needs are not drama. Protecting yourself isn't selfish. People who love you don't forget your birthday. They don't wait to be invited. And sometimes the quietest person in the room holds the loudest truth. You don't need to shout to be heard. You need courage, evidence, and the willingness to speak. If this story touched you, share your thoughts below. Have you ever had to set firm boundaries with toxic family? Have you discovered who your real people are? And if you're new here, hit subscribe. I share stories like this every week with another one waiting in the description. Thank you for being here, for listening. See you next time.